something called as CSS. CSS is nothing, it's a cascaded style sheet. It means if you want to design the page, something color and other things, and there are a lot of things need to be done through with help of CSS. Even if when you are going to make the website as a bootstrap, then you required CSS, and that is actually today we use CSS 3. Let's proceed what we are going to see today. So we'll be talking today about what is the CSS. That means in CSS, we are going to talk about what is CSS, the CSS syntax, the location of styles. That means how you can access the style sheet. Then what are the types of selectors we have. Then how the style sheet is going to interact with your HTML. What is the box model and how you can do the text styling. That means you have a text, you want to do the some styling for that. Okay, so these things we will be learning in this part 2 section of the first module. Okay, the first is what is CSS. When we talk about the CSS, that means it's nothing, it's about the styling. That means you are going to make your page to appear beautifully. That means you have seen that on any of the website, the image is continuously scrolling one after another. Then you have some text in different color. When you put the mouse over on that, then different color. So these things will be happen with help of CSS only. That is the actually use of CSS. This CSS is stand for cascaded style sheet, and this is actually is a W3. W3 already you know that it's a nothing. It's a World Wide Web. Okay, World Wide Web Consortium. So W3 is World Wide Web Consortium, and this standards has described the presentation. That means how you do this. I'm doing this PPT. You can see here I'm using some different color here. Okay, and might be you can use different font also. So with the same way, when you want to display on your HTML page or your website, then you are going to do the presentation. In other way, we call as a presentation. So that is actually its appearance. So how the appearance will affect on HTML, and this will be happen only with help of CSS. You have to use CSS only as a correct style sheet. Then with CSS, we can assign, what are the things we can assign? We can assign font properties. What is the font properties? That means you can see here I'm using this font style. So this will be Times New Roman, whichever format you want, which types you want, you can use. You want font size to be bigger, smaller, capital, whatever, all things is included into the font properties that we can assign you with help of CSS. You can assign the colors. That means you need a different color for the different text, different paragraph, different heading tag, whatever the so on you want to define the color on HTML page. That also can be done with help of CSS. Then you can define the size of any text also. You can define border. The moment you define any paragraph, you want something, that paragraph to be written into the particular border. Like I want like this way to be designed, and inside that our content will be there. So this will be done with help of CSS. That is borders you can define. If you want the background image, that's what that day I said, the background image you can even give directly, but with help of CSS also you can do it. So this is the background image also you can assign with help of CSS. Okay, even the positioning of elements, like that means you want the elements at which position to be applied, that also you can do it. Then CSS. So CSS is a language in that it has its own syntax rules. Whenever you are going to, like how HTML having its own syntax rule, same way CSS, it's also a language and it's also having a its own rule. Okay, so that we can define the CSS. The CSS can be added directly to any HTML element. Whenever if you want to add CSS in any HTML page, that you can do it. How you can do? So you can do within the head elements. Whenever you are going to define the head element, that means head tag, within that, that means wherever the closing of head will be there. So wherever you're defining the closing of head, within that you are going to use the CSS. Before that, within head tag, ending of tag, you can define this CSS tag, you can directly assign into the HTML page. Or when you are, that means when you are defining a separate text file that contains CSS, that means you have a separate, you are creating a separate HTML page and you are creating separate CSS file, then within the head element you can assign, or on that particular page also you can directly assign the CSS. As I mentioned, CSS stands for cascading style sheet. CSS describes how HTML elements are to be displayed on the screen, paper, or in other media. So simple, nothing is there. It's just how you are going to do the presentation in better way. That is actually your CSS. So in HTML element, that means on HTML based or on your website, how beautifully you are going to display your page on the screen or on the paper. That is will describe the CSS. CSS will save a lot of words. Why? Because every page, you suppose you have this many paragraph in HTML. How I am defining this bold letter here? Every time you will be typing the bold for the particular syntax or particular paragraph. But with the CSS, you can define once and you can call. That is the selector that you can use it. And also, if you have multiple pages, like suppose the same way I have another page, and again I want to use the CSS. So every page you will be writing the code. So what happened? The code is number of lines of code is getting increased, and you are keep adding the style code on every page. So what happened? The utilization is getting increased. So what we'll do? We'll create a separate style sheet. That means external style sheet, and it will be stored in .css file. And whenever you need, you can access in the dot in the heading section, and that will be accessed in HTML page. Then when we talk about the benefits of CSS, what are the benefits we have CSS? Why we are using CSS? So the question always we ask that why CSS? So obviously CSS is just because we want the better presentation of HTML. That means the look of HTML page should look attractive, colorful. That purpose we will be using CSS. The point number one, the degree of formatting control in CSS is significantly better than provided in HTML. That means we were using in HTML the styling code, and when you use with help of CSS, that will be better because it will be having a separate format control where you can define the style on each paragraph wherever you need once you define in CSS compared to HTML. Then website becomes significantly more maintainable because all formatting can be centralized into one or a small handful of CSS file. What is the meaning of this? The meaning is very simple. That means whenever you create a website, it's not one page website, you have 100 page of website. Okay, and you want some particular text. Suppose I have used this maintainable in entire 100 pages, and I want to change this color of maintainable on all 100 pages. So what do you have to do? If you are doing with help of HTML only, then you have to go each page and then you have to define. That means think opening HTML page, changing the code, 100 page, at least it will take 1 minute to each page to do that. So 100 minutes required to complete this. But the same way, if you have a centralized, that means you have a CSS file, just you open the particular CSS file and just change one code. That's all, finish. Entire 100 page, this will get changed. So that's why I say that it will become significantly more maintainable. You can maintain easily the websites. The CSS driven sites are more accessible. Why? Because the look and feel, the like designing, the architecture, it will be clearly visible. So you can able to access the whatever the menu bar or whatever the area the people define on the website, it will be clearly visible and it fit into the mobile, that means responsive application. A site built using a centralized set of CSS files for all presentation will also be quicker to download because each individual HTML file contains less markup. What is the meaning is that? The meaning is that when you define, as I said, you have 100 pages, and if you write the CSS code on all 100 pages, so whenever you are opening a website on your browser, either you use mobile phone, either you use your laptop, first it will get downloaded in the form of cookies, okay, or cache. Then only you are able to see the design of the particular website. So if you have 100 pages, that means whenever you use 100 pages, 100 times that particular CSS will be loaded because you are using the CSS code on the particular page. But when you have a centralized set of CSS file, that means once you open a main site, any one page, that means that CSS file cache will be enabled in the browser and it will be cookies will be there. The moment you open the site, it's quicker to download the individual HTML page because already in cache, browser cache, that is there. This is the best benefits of CSS. CSS can be used to add up a page for different output medium. Okay, so you can use for the different output, that means different design whenever you want, you can have with this CSS. Next, when we'll talk about the, now so far we have talked what is the CSS, what is the benefit of CSS, and now we will talk about what is CSS versions we have. Okay.
Nicely said. Get into the session. And we can take up details of the questions in the evening. Group discussion. Okay. Okay, Rajasthan. Welcome to the session. I can see K. Sharad Babu sir. I just unmuted. Sharad Babu sir.
Yeah, good morning, ma'am.
Good morning. Namaste, sir.
Yes, past 2 days we were engaged with the sessions. So all the sessions are very effective, and we came to know many things that we didn't realize in a period of time. Okay. So the first thing what I understood is right understanding is the main pillar of developing harmony. So when we talk about the right understanding, when we focus on
Okay, now we will talk about the CSS versions. What are the versions of CSS we have? Okay, as we know that generally W3C gives the recommendation. The same way W3 published the CSS Level 1, that was in 1996. A year later, that means after a year, it has come CSS Level 2 recommendation, and also more like labeled simply, you can see that the CSS2. Generally, we generally don't pronounce as a CSS Level 1, CSS Level 2. We say that CSS1, CSS2. Even though the work began over decades ago and updated the several versions of Level 2, after recommendation, it has come CSS 2.1, but did not become the officially early stage. But finally in June 2011, they made CSS 2.1 officially recommended, because there will be something loophole or something will be not working functionality or something will be there. They will not recommend to publish until W3C will not publish. It will not come lively worldwide. So that's why in June 2011 CSS 2.1 came. And then after, because after June 2011, the smartphones, I think 2009 or 2008 onwards, the smartphones and other devices started coming. So what happened? The website was not getting appeared into the mobile screen. It was, you have to scroll to the right hand side, left hand side to view the entire website. So in that case, it was failure, the CSS 2.1. Then again, they did the research. Again, they had to put the effort, and finally they overcome with the CSS 3 draft work. And then after, the CSS 3 is started. Next, when we talk about the browser adoption, that means which browser has accepted the CSS. That means it's not like that, okay, whatever we use, that is available in the browser. If you take a look today, in most of the website, the Flash has been removed. Early days, even YouTube, it was running on Flash Player. But today it is not on Flash Player, it is on advanced version, either AngularJS, Node.js, or some other jQuery will be there. Okay, the same way it is there. So early days, that which browser was supporting this CSS, that is very important. So in starting, the Internet Explorer 6 came in the picture with the adoption of CSS. That is Microsoft Internet Explorer. So was an earlier champion of CSS. That means only one browser was there to support the CSS. And its later version is came like i5, 6, 7, 8, 9, I, then after i9, and after that i11, and now it is Microsoft Edge that we have. So for the Windows, and even support of certain part of CSS2. In fact, all the browser have left certain part of CSS2 and recommended for unimplemented, because most of the browser in early days, they were not supporting for the CSS2. Only few browser were there. Now CSS has put a reputation for being somewhat frustrating language, because it was not supporting in the browser. People were not able to get the exact what they want. So obviously there will be the frustration will be there, why it's not working. Okay. Yeah. So that's what it was, frustrating language. And this reputation was well deserved, because it was definitely, when you do the some program and when you not get the output, obviously you feel, oh, this is very boring subject, or which you will not understand, right? Or if you are not getting inside you that, okay, oh, this is very boring subject, it's not good, I don't like this subject, because you are not able to understand, right? The same way the developers, when it was not coming, obviously they will say that, this is the frustrating language. So like that, it was, the discussion was there for the CSS. And early days, Microsoft Internet Explorer was the champion for the CSS. They were supporting and some part of CSS. But today, all the browser supports CSS3 especially. CSS1 by default will be there, CSS2 by default will be there, and CSS3 is there. So all the browsers support CSS3 especially, and Bootstrap now. Even your mobile browser, even your tablet, even your laptop, desktop, whatever the, even your Android devices, Android TVs, everywhere